Are you ready for the next round?
Yes.
I think that yesterday you got very intrigued by Yaro, so what's going to be later. I hope I will not disappoint you, and I hope you will help me with these predictions, because they actually depend on us, because it's the work in progress. And in order to start with what comes after MDGs, we need to evaluate what's going on now. So this is my presentation in brief. It has 4 different blocks. First, we will discuss and debate on what happens when crises strike, be them man-made or natural disasters, and what and how it may affect on the attainment of MDGs. And then I will speak about the newly adopted and applied mechanism called MDG acceleration framework. Can you raise your hands, those who know about this concept? MDG acceleration framework? UNDP people and what? Okay. And then you already have gone through this interesting exercise of SWOT analysis. We will not do the full SWOT, we will only speak about weaknesses and strengths of the MDGs. And it will be a recap of yesterday's Yaro's lecture, because he was pointing at both. So we'll see how much of it you remember, and maybe you will come up with your own ideas. And then the most intriguing point is about what's next. Okay, MDGs in times of crisis. What do you think? So we have a beautiful strategy on paper. We developed indicators, we started implementing them, we committed some funds. The whole process started, and the developing countries receive this coordinated aid, and then we got economical crisis. How you think potentially it will affect the receiving countries, and how it will affect donors?
There will be less ODA flowing from Euro area, US to SSA and
good point. So if the governments were able to allocate 1% of GDP per year from their budgets to this development aid, now they may not afford it because they do not have money for themselves. What's next?
I think on a more conceptual side, it has changed the priorities of the state. People got more concerned with restoring the economy and probably forgetting about issues related to the social sphere and those issues that are in MDGs.
Okay, so the
so
change of
the process just because the priorities.
So they slow down.
Yes.
Fine. Very good point.
And also about trade. I think there will on trade, the impact on trade, because there are countries that are exchange some food or some other productions. So I think first of all, crisis will have its impact both receiving the country where there is a crisis, and also for neighboring countries as well, with other countries that the country has relations.
Okay, thanks a lot, Yomi.
Donor fatigue in the terms of the increase in number of countries receiving loans. Because the more the crisis increases, the more even countries that originally do not receive funding will be part of it, will be included.
Included into what?
Like, for example, Greece is usually not part of the traditional.
So there will be a redirection of this money flow.
Yes.
You believe in
There's
this?
the number of countries receiving the aid in Greece.
Okay.
there may be a downturn as well in the quality of ODA money, since the donors countries may be willing to invest a little portion of their GDPs on strategic priorities on their own, instead of triggering genuine local development, let's say using ODA as a diplomatic tool.
Yes.
Like this.
Thanks a lot. I will not take more, but you gave very good insights, and let me just in brief tell what the initial assessments of MDGs in terms of crisis says. So crisis attacks 2 critical drivers of progress towards MDGs. One of them was mentioned, faster growth. So we cannot, as fast as possible, make progress of MDGs. It slows down. And the second one is that the delivery of services also worsens. because all these connections, all these instruments are getting distracted, because people got other priorities and redirect their forces, their attention, and money. But, surprise, surprise, there were very interesting lessons learned from financial crisis, and these results were published by the World Bank. And these lessons were quite positive. One is that after the crisis struck, the effectiveness of the aid got better. And it actually received extraordinary quality and policy responses. Why it happened? Because, you know, it's like in your family. When you have less money, you try to spend it more carefully, more effectively, and maybe you think of different ways of using your money, yes? And maybe you also ask for some support. So it's not only donors, now it's governments also became more active and more responsive to all these changes and mechanisms. And also the sizable assistance by international development donors and financial institutions did not decrease. So donors committed their money and they were keeping the promise. This slide perhaps you have seen, but those who watched my presentation online during the online module, who watched my presentation? Julia, okay. So this, you may not see. I'm so sorry, you cannot see. This is basically the table on how far we are for reaching the MDGs in different directions. And you cannot see, for example, that the bar for MDG 5 or maternal mortality is far from reaching its goal. And you don't see that also the access to sanitation. Let's assume that this is the top. Yes, so this is the reaching top of MDGs by 2015. And you can see how far some of the bars up to that value. So we are missing the primary complete rate, and we're missing the child mortality, maternal mortality, access to sanitation. So global-wise, this is how we are standing in 2010 vis-a-vis the achieved goals by 2015. And this is quite interesting table. These are modelings. These are patterns of how the MDGs are reaching its goal by 2020 here, the predictions are. The red line is let's start with the yellow one. That was the pre-crisis. So for MDG 2, the primary completion rate was really, the trend was going up straight. But for the post-crisis, the red line, you can see that it slows down, as we said. But with the low growth, with the economical and financial decrease of financial aid, the forecasting and prediction is that it will even slow down more and more. And it actually relates to each and every MDG globally. So what to do? As I said, it was found out that during the crisis, the governments, the local communities became more mobilized. So some of the countries, like in these 3 case studies, were even proactive in their actions, because they were understanding that anything may happen at any time, and even if you integrate MDGs into your PRSPs, into the national development strategies, into your community small planning, anything may happen. So they did a mapping, and they did a mapping and found the pockets of poverty in their communities, in their localities. And they were, some countries were delivering the cash as a social protection mechanism. So they were identifying the households which were needed money for. If it's a big household with lots of children, if it is a mother-led household who is a breadwinner, and so on and so forth. So it was very, very targeted assistance. And the other countries, they were using the method of safety nets. And so they had that mapping of the country already before the crisis. So when the crisis struck, they were able to target this assistance to a particular communities, to a particular families, which benefited from them, and they were able to stabilize the situation. I'm not going into depth into these case studies, just as 3 examples. You can find them online. And then the UN came up with an idea. How many years we have before the deadline? 3 years and a half. Yes. So what do we normally do to optimize our efforts? For example, now you are preparing for your group assignments. And you know that the deadline is 3 days and a half, exactly the same. There is days for MDGs, days for you. So what do? You optimize. How do you do that?
Sleepless night.
More coffee.
So there is an unsustainability of your sleeping time, yes. So this is a disadvantage, of course. But what do you do? Exactly. So you reassign your tasks, you see where you progressed more, and you leave it there, and you see where you still have gaps, and you try to lift it up. The same with MDGs, the same principle is being used. Look what happens. This framework is very easy and straightforward way to build upon a country's knowledge and experience. So it is not anymore donor-driven. It's the country itself which looks into what it can do, like by assessing what the situation and how they can improve the situation in particular areas of MDGs, in particular goals. It is doing so by identifying the off-track MDGs. So it looks into all 8, 7, because 8 is for global partnership, it's for donors. They look into all 7 and see the trends where they are standing and sees where they can still make more extra effort, another mile, to go and improve the situation by the deadline. This framework also supports the increased focus on what is needed to accelerate progress in the years remaining to 2015. And it's being implemented since 2010. They identified 10 pilot countries, they are listed here, where the countries themselves were saying, okay, we are good in poverty eradication, but we are lagging behind with HIV. So each country identified between 1 and 2 MDGs where they needed extra support on extra mechanisms, and these was extra money were added to a normal flow of assistance to these countries. And starting 2011, there was another bunch of countries who jumped into this exercise, and from our region, I know of 2 countries. Ukraine is about safety nets, and Moldova asked for extra money for HIV/AIDS infection. So, and this is a small exercise for you. It's not from our region, but a very good example. So we have Malawi and we have Zambia. And this goal is about primary education, yeah? So primary completion rate. And this goal is under 5 mortality rate. And the same here for Zambia. What do you see here? What you can derive from these tables, from these charts.
Well, that is not a trend.
So the first line is the same indicator for 2 countries. What's the trend? Is it the same? Is it alike?
Malawi and Zambia.
Zambia slips down.
Okay, so Zambia is lagging behind.
Recovered.
Yeah, so it recovered, it's on track now. Yes. While Malawi
peaked and went down.
Yes. Yeah. And what happens to the MDG under 5.4, MDG 4?
Malawi seems to be on track.
Yes.
While Zambia is not.
Yeah, for Zambia it's like
like state.
Okay, so you are the government officials. What would you do within this MDG acceleration framework?
Exchange experience between the countries. There's
you are lacking all the resources. You have only 3 hours and a half to go. So would you concentrate, for example, for Malawi, would you concentrate more on the under 5 channel mortality, or
no,
you would
primary.
Okay, but it is quite the opposite. It's just the opposite for Zambia, right? So this is what is happening now in most of the countries who are jumping into this exercise. They realign their efforts. And I will give you some examples because they are interesting in terms of how governments manage to look out of the box. Because normally we use some particular mechanisms as we used to do in terms of, for example, alleviating poverty. But look into these examples, what the governments created as an idea. For the agricultural countries, where agriculture is the most dominating sector, they focused on transferring the technology and improving the farmers' methods, so that they have more harvest, have more crops maybe, and have food for their communities. For other countries, it was about water management, and they were installing dams, they were introducing drip irrigations and wells. And for other countries, it was about labor, and it was about saving job places. So they were creating mechanisms so that at least they can save job places. But do you think it is sustainable? That's my question all the time. Because you are rushing, you just want to reach the deadline by all means. Yes, so in reality it's a little bit unsustainable method, but what is good is that they are not standard. For the gender MDG goal, there were also very interesting methods used. For example, some schools they eliminated fees, which gave more incentives for the parents to send their kids to school. So the education became more accessible for all. For the Arab countries, it was about physical infrastructure, so they tried to renew the old buildings and maybe construct some more in the remote places, so that more statistically more children could be counted as enrolled into the schooling. And others were using the school food programs, so they were feeding the children for free, and it was also an incentive to send a child. And for the under 5 mortality, they were checking the healthcare system, neonatal, prenatal care, and they were giving more money for vaccination, antibiotics for infections, and looking after the kids straight after birth. So these are methods in extreme situations, but they're very helpful. But at the expense of other MDGs, because you stop progressing in the others and you concentrate on particular ones. Okay, next section, MDG strengths and weaknesses. Now your turn. Let's start from strengths. What did you learn from yesterday? Or what's your opinion? What is the MDG's strength?
Easy to understand.
They are easy, they are digestible. Okay, good point.
Roadmap to follow for everyone. A roadmap, a guideline.
For everyone in the country level?
Yes.
Okay, good point.
It is also direction for the company. It's a good group of directions so that you understand what's the situation in specific areas and what's going to be done to go for development.
Okay.
To understand it, yes.
Okay.
And raising awareness in the sense that maybe at country level people wouldn't do their situation analysis and they wouldn't actually know what's the problem or how big it is. But by being pushed with this global agenda, perhaps they became more aware, and in the end, because of this, might actually take
So we really became more aware of globally where we are and how to measure it, yes, and what we need to do in order to improve the situation. Maybe the developed world learned more about the situation in the developing world, because in order to give money, you really look into the situation in the countries, and it makes you more aware. Yes.
In fact, it has translated these goals into rights of individuals. Right for education, right for food.
Yes.
So
MDGs were more right-based approach. And do you think it was? Remember, there was a question about the goods, the private goods and public goods. MDGs are caring about what type of goods? Public goods. Okay. What's next?
I think, first of all, I like the issues that it covers. Like, it is more comprehensible for each person, and I think those 8 are just enough to cover. They are 8, but they cover more.
So they cover more than economics, they cover more than environment, they are more within the pillars of sustainability, without, of course, governance, as Yara mentioned yesterday, and maybe participation. But still, yes, and they are more digestible. Maybe they are elementary, but they go beyond GDP, beyond the measures that we used to have before. Very good point. Very good point. So remember, we were talking, I don't know who it was, saying that if you look into the documents of the country, development documents, each of them incorporated MDGs and made it a priority. It's very good. So we made the sensitization. Any other ideas?
easy to
Because they
measure.
got money.
Tangible measurement. How do you?
Very good point. What happens in the past, actually what was not mentioned yesterday, and I was surprised that nobody told this, is that it's for the first time in the history of humankind when we globally decided to measure as many countries as possible and to see and track the progress. First time in the human history. Not in GDP, but in a wider, broader perspective.
And
Sorry, I will continue. So, and in order to do that, we had to bring into a comparative level all the MDG all the measurements. How countries calculate poverty? In Uzbekistan, for example, it's still in calories. We don't calculate it in how many dollars per person we spend. It's still in calories. So unless we have one unique metadata for measuring, one international system for collecting data and interpreting it, we may not compare countries. So it makes the statistical officers more aware and adopting the international standards. Yes.
And I think what Merita said, of course it is very good for the country to establish its structure, to develop its structure, and also for its, as it is a world, MDGs are worldwide, it also stresses, put on pressure the countries to do their best, also for their reputation as well.
Yeah. For the shape of nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you covered many things, but let me wrap up. So first of all, there was this built consensus because 189 nations signed the Millennium Declaration and almost all of them adopted the MDG goals. So it was agreed upon UN states and relevant international organizations who were behind standing as a driving force for implementing it. And it was a reference to joint efforts and combination because it allowed for more effective cooperation and donor alignment. And it harmonized the bi- and multilateral donor coherence of donor policies, and it allowed for synergies. It was Bigait, I think. We had a small discussion with her, and she said, "Oh, I'm writing a paper about the foreign investments into the country. So can you tell me what are the mechanisms of making sure that this is not the wrong kind of investment and it's really improves the situation in the country?" And I said that even in my country of Uzbekistan, we make a screening of whether this investment will fit into the MDGs priorities of the country. So this cooperation of aid and its directions and effectiveness was really well coordinated. And at the country level, the whole UN system is looking after MDGs. It's not just one assigned agency. And sometimes it's even the group of international organizations who are using it as an umbrella and communicate and negotiate with the governments. What else? Strength is about the impact rather than an input. So with these goals, we were not speaking about just inputting, but we were looking in a longer term about what an impact it will have on people's life. And MDGs called for concrete achievements. In aid effectiveness and efficiency, they were timely, time-bound, they were impact-oriented, but there was no strategy. At the beginning, when MDGs started working and there were worldwide campaigns on MDGs awareness, they were at the global level. And the main aim of having MDGs was about, the world was so unequal that the idea was that we, with the help of developed money and capital, lift up the rest, because it was so diverse that we could not actually make measurements which would be an unequal balance level. So the idea was basically about lifting up the rest of the countries so that they get closer. And the economic many of the papers are saying thanks to financial crisis that it put down of the developed world and we really became more equal across the countries, not within the countries. And I will tell you why. Yes. And the weakness was that since it was at the global level at the beginning, nobody was thinking of what to do about, since the world is so diverse, how we nationalize them. Yeah, Yara was saying about national MDGs. And there were many countries who were changing even the interpretation of the goal. For Uzbekistan, instead of extreme poverty, we were speaking about eliminating malnutrition, or in the educational sphere, it was not about primary education, it was about quality of the secondary education. Many countries introduced additional goals, their national ones, on governance. So countries were improvising, yeah. But at the beginning, it was not envisaged. That's why there was no strategy. It was improvisation. There was no concrete mechanism on how to do it. So developing countries designed their own implementation strategies. And as it was said, that MDGs are plausible and close to the people's day-to-day life. They're elementary, but understood and being understood and digested by many people. Even if you go to children, you can explain in the cartoons or in the drawings. If you go to a farmer, you will be still being able to explain what MDG is about and how it changes this particular life. And it was a good for mobilizing societies in developed and developing countries and pushing governments for mobilization of additional energies and resources for international development. Okay. Now about weaknesses.
It does not address inequality, only poverty. I think inequality is equally important.
Perfect point. MDGs completely ignored inequality.
And I think also it's ignored pretty much economic sides of sustainable development. And I think maybe it's very specific, but I think more emphasis should be put on creating infrastructure for development.
But how about MDG 1 and MDG 8? They are tackling economic side. But poverty and providing youth with jobs.
Yes, but how? The means for reaching these goals, means for reaching these goals are not there. That's my point. Like, maybe not to put too much emphasis again on economic growth, but somehow reflect on how you guys gonna achieve poverty or eliminate poverty. By which means, and I think it's a bit. It's missing there, and it would be nice to have it in the agenda. And I think that's why also infrastructure is important here, to create roads, to build schools for these kind of things. I don't know, that's my own understanding on what can be probably improved. And another thing that we discussed...
Can you give a chance for others to...
sorry. Okay, sorry.
Vlad and then Alexander, and then Fatma.
Another disadvantage that MDGs don't include a lot of important things, like human rights, for example.
But we discussed it yesterday. It was very difficult to measure.
Yeah, so that's why the...
Alexander?
In relation to what Becca said, and also you referenced earlier, by not having, I don't know, maybe a focus on economy and sustainability, economic growth, in a hurry to reach new goals by any means, they might choose unsustainable paths, which from my point of view is acceptable, because I really believe that first we need to fix problems in order to look forwards and have positive sustainable approaches, but sometimes the type of solutions can't be fixed later. So maybe by not monitoring the economic growth or the way we reach the goals.
So just to paraphrase you, is that while setting these goals, we were not thinking about indicators which would show us how we sustain the achievements. It was about just reaching the goal. Yeah?
Yeah, so there's no sustainability.
Fabio?
Yeah, I mean, the environmental pillar is very, very weak. It's just about
there are lots of complaints about
waste management and human settlement and like. There is no mention of energy, which is very, very critical in developing countries, and you cannot deliver. And
climate change is not there.
Climate change is not policy. So it is very narrow, I would say, in the number of topics, crucial topics, which MDGs address.
Okay. Well.
I rather have a different position regarding the no strategy that you're talking about. MDGs are silent about proposing the ways by which I think that's a good thing, because we can have a strategy that every member can use to attain any goal. The strategies, they need to be based on country experiences, based on countries' levels of development, and even based on countries' initial conditions and experience. So I think keeping silent on the strategies for me is good. Like you said, some countries are using school feeding programs, some are building more schools, some are reducing school fees. These are various strategies that countries can adopt based on their level.
It's a good point. So the lack of strategy is actually a two-sided coin, that it provides you with the opportunity to improvise and to use your own method.
So at the end of the day, we can share best practices.
Okay. Yula?
Absence of mechanisms that force governments actually to keep promises and to do.
No, we had one shame.
Yeah, but shame
deserves reputation.
doesn't work usually very efficiently.
Okay, and the last maybe.
I just only want to continue the idea that I just yesterday spoke about that it's very much important for developing countries. They very often don't pay any attention to this, and it is only in documentary form. And sometimes the government only put this burden to the next holders of this officials, so they don't very much oblige to do something.
Okay. Sorry, Christina, the last one.
Regarding ODA, it lacks efficiency for cooperation and coordination among the different donors, bilateral or whatever. And in least developed countries, lack of transparency on actually how much of the ODA is remaining in that country and how much of it goes back to the donor, and what is diverted through corruption or whatever else.
Yeah. So even though we were speaking and MDGs reported that it was a very good mechanism, coordination mechanism, there are other opposite points of view that we were lacking that, and when you have enormous amount of money, you, through corrupted systems, still absorb it in order to not to return, and perhaps many countries didn't do this costing of MDGs. So before giving money, you should ask the country whether you have enough funds and where is the gap, and show me how much of the gap, and then only then I will give you that amount that you are lacking. Yes. Okay, so again, wrapping up. Neglecting quality aspect. So it was mentioned that MDGs are lacking inequality, and I'm going by examples. For example, MDG 2 covers school enrollment, but it doesn't speak about the quality or the relevance of education to the labor market. So whether what we study and what we learn is actually can be applied in the labor market. MDGs on child mortality and maternal mortality rates, it is extreme. MDGs, it's about life or death. But inequalities are happening in your life, and it's about how healthy life you are living. So it's like in morbidity rates. What is morbidity? Anybody has an idea? Exactly. So it says this indicator tells you what a healthy life you are living, how many diseases you were exposed to in your life, how many disabled years of living you had, how many have been to the hospital. So you may live a longer life of 90 years, but you can be a person with disability, or you may have a serious car accident and then become less able to move, to work, to lead an active life.
Is it like an indicator?
It's an indicator. And also, it completely ignores the quality of life of people with disabilities. MDG 7, as we were talking, it was not taking into account climate change and biodiversity and energy. Also, inconsistencies. You went through this paper's exercise on Sustainable Human Development Index, and you know what is the difference between input, output, outcome, and impact. So with MDGs, we also cannot bring, it was lacking the consistency. For example, MDG 8 was about output level. So you have input money, you deliver, you got the technologies, you give essential drugs, and there is an output level. The next level is an impact, like reduction of child mortality or infectious diseases. So it is more complex. In order to reduce child mortality, or in order to reduce the spread of infectious diseases, it requires more complex actions. So it is an outcome level. And the impact level is within MDGs 1 and 2. Sorry, I mixed it. So output level is reduction of income poverty and primary school enrollment, and all others are affecting the impact level, which is being child mortality and infection disease, because it's very, 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 very complex. And it's also about reaching absolute level or making relative change or absolute change. And here is the list of MDGs which differ between their levels of achievement. And it was a shame that we were so precautious when setting the goals back in 2000. It was a political dispute, of course, and perhaps you know that MDGs were not publicly discussed. Yes. There was just, I would say, even imposed or silently signed and pushed through the UN mechanism. So it wasn't a participatory manner or effective manner, so it was imposed. But they did it at the expense of how ambitious the goal put for 2015, and I will explain to you. See the trend from 1960, when we had 66% of share of people who lived with an income less than $1.25 in purchasing power parity. And by 1090, it's just a trend that it's decreasing. So politicians just decided, okay, just using this trend, using this anyway uncoordinated efforts, it will still decrease, and let's put the deadline of decreasing the poverty by 2 in 2015. So it was not extra effort put in it. And even other global documents, like the goal during the World Food Summit in 1996, it was saying that we are reaffirming and we are committed to reduce the number of undernourished people to half their present level no later than by 2015. And their baseline was, and their goal was more ambitious. It meant that we will change, annual change, reducing by 3.6% of the poverty. And the Millennium Declaration's pace of change was 3.6% of decrease of poverty. While when we talk about MDGs, we thought, okay, why should we bother too much? It's still a decrease, and puts a less ambitious goal, only with 2.5% decrease per year. So, even if we don't do anything, even if there is a financial crisis, we will still reach this point. So, this is a shame. But other goals, like one on access to primary education, was overambitious. Because the closer you are to 100%, the more of efforts it takes to reach it. It's very easy to lift people up from the situation when they are in the very bottom. You just make a small contribution, or you make a small little change in their lives, and they're getting better. But the closer you are to the ideal situation, the more complex situation becomes, the more drop-offs or unexpected situations may happen. And with these correlations, it was proved that if you see the trend, we are not reaching the primary school enrollment. It's going slower. And this graph says that for the countries which primary education enrollment is very small, it will take them another 50 years minimum to reach the level of developed world. So in order to achieve this goal, we need 50 years from 2000. Okay? Clear? The indicators did not include relative poverty, inequality, vulnerability, empowerment of poor, social justice, no discrimination. Only MDG 1 has one target about the income distribution, which is the share of poorest quintile in consumption. And MDG 2 calls for universal access to basic education, but it is not speaking about free access to education, right? So, access for who is benefiting from it. Or even if you want to improve the mean values of child mortality and women's mortality. But who benefits from this progress? All the population, some group of population? Is it for free, or it is still a business model, and so on and so forth? So, yes? Sorry, I don't hear.
In terms of World War, do you think that it takes into consideration the concept of proper growth?
The concept of?
Proper growth.
Proper growth? Yes, it does. Absolutely. Yes. Of course, because this is the principle of targeting the poor people more than anybody else. So what's next? What do you think? When I joined UNDP, it was 1999, and then the MDG goals were introduced in 2001, and we started the MDG campaign. So I was exposed to all these interesting, actions and efforts by my organization onwards. And already in 2002 or 2003, when I was really part of all this big story, I was already asking myself, okay, 2015 we reach it, what's next? Did you ask yourself this question?
Yes.
So what do you think?
And you?
MDGs too.
Sorry?
Yeah. Next MDGs.
Upgraded MDGs. Okay, next phase of MDGs. Okay. By doing what?
By continuing what was left after reaching the
And
adding what is not included.
What is the priority at that time? Okay. What else? What do you think?
I mean, after
2015. Yeah.
I think we cannot say anything.
Many people can say Fabio.
Well, actually, we can say something. Apparently, we will have sustainable development goals, which somehow will inherit the MDGs by including also sustainability and sustainable environmental concern.
Okay, can I ask you why sustainable development goals and whose idea it was, if you know?
Thank you more.
One person.
Not at all. Who suggested sustainable development goals?
It was Bolivia and Ecuador. I don't know where.
Close but not. Prior to the Rio+20 summit, these were two countries who wrote a note and made a big fuss about it and introduced this concept. It was Colombia and Guatemala. Okay, what else can we say about post-2015 agenda? There were hands. I don't see them anymore.
I think that the problem that we don't mention is like MDG are because we want to measure them. We concentrate only on these achievements goals like we can, education, health, and so on. But actually, we don't look into when we want to treat someone. Yes, we ask actually what case the disease, and we don't ask about what case the disease, why the state doesn't function well, why there's problem with education, and so on. So hopefully in next phase, there will be place for those unmeasurables indicators or like good governance, human rights, and so on.
Okay, so maybe we will take into account international conventions which are already at that level. For example, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have the Convention against discrimination of all forms, for all forms of discrimination against women. We have lots of international obligations so far. Yes, so why not to include them? What other upgrades would you do to MDGs?
I think before doing anything in these 2-3 remaining years, although I believe action is needed and not words and reports necessarily, I still think we need to look back and do a serious proper analysis of why some of the goals were not reached, where and how, and what could be improved on a country level, participatory, collaborative, come up with conclusions, and then based on that try to establish something new for the future.
But yesterday I sent you the link to the MDG report 2012. This is the analytical paper, so it tracks and it comes up with the policy recommendations. So this is an assessment instrument. on the way. And many nations are producing their national MDG progress reports. And I remember it was about Lithuania, and we were asking, oh, we don't know what's happening with MDGs in our country. I haven't heard about anything. But I looked into your website, and in 2002, straight after population census, your country did produce the MDG report. So if we do it in a more or less stable and frequent manner, we will be able to see and adjust the policies.
But sometimes the problem with the reports are that actually people are not aware of them.
Yeah, because as I said, the idea of MDGs was lifting up the developing world. So donors are not people, donors are governments. Yeah, and of course you need to do sensitization to explain to people where your taxes are going.
Yeah.
Yes, if you, for example, if your tax statement has some asterisks and it says that please tick the box that you are committing 1% of your tax to the developing world, it would be an instrument.
And maybe we need also more diversity in the next MDGs, because we say that actually they are not really applied to CIS region or Europe, for example. So maybe we should create some kind of goals more concentrated on, for example, African issues, Asian issues, Europe's issues, and or make them more flexible. Of course, it can be more difficult.
Can a little bit correct you. Maybe not flexible, but more universal. Because if before it was about one part of the world helping another, maybe since now the situation is more or less balanced, we create the goals which are which are applicable for all.
But then what
do you agree?
But what does it mean for Europe, for example, or United States? That's just actually they shouldn't develop at all.
But if we have more ambitious goals, if we have them more with the more sophisticated statistics and indicators,
that we will be developed faster and we will use like 4 errors instead of 2.5. Yes.
But in this case, we will not have complaints that the half of the globe doesn't know what's happening.
And I wouldn't say that Europe and America don't need to develop. I would say they need to go towards a more sustainable way of living.
Don't we have homeless people in Europe? Don't we have Roma exclusion in Europe? I was surprised when 5 years ago I came across the Human Development Reports of America, and they developed their HDI and make it up to the municipality level. So pockets of poverty, pockets of vulnerability and sustainability are happening all across the world.
Another thing which probably should be changed it's the name, because millennium development.
Millennium can last for millennium.
I just have some addition to what Vlad said. The minor point probably not that important, but still I think it plays a role. The label is a bit not universal. Like teddy bear is obviously not the toy which all the kids in every country play. So I think it reflects somehow more Western kind of.
Would sustainability fit into the label? Sustainability fit into this more?
No, I just mean the pictures which describe every goal should be more universal. Like the cross also, it's not the sign of medicine, right, in every country. So that's minor things, but I think they all contribute.
Yes.
I could somehow take into account or incorporate the fact that the population is growing, because as Christina mentioned, there might be good efforts to fight against hunger, but still in relative terms, the number of people who are malnourished or starving are increasing. So even though the targets are set in percentages, even though we are reaching these targets, maybe the people who are suffering is still, and the number is still increasing.
Yes, that's a very good point. So we are talking about relative terms, yes, not about absolute terms. So in population average as a proportion, we're still having a high number of people who are malnourished.
I'm just wondering whether these groups, we started by in a very loose way, where we said that, well, it's not compulsory, it's not final, but it's just a guide for you to work towards it. I'm just wondering whether the next step, we wouldn't want to sort of tighten the memberships a bit, so that once you are going to be a member, you make it something like obligatory or so to work towards it, so that we end it by incentives. Okay, because you started by saying that there was a review where some countries were selected. You didn't tell us whether those countries were rewarded or punished. No,
I mentioned the group of 10 which were. And so there is a second, and there will be next stage. Each year they select new group of countries. They apply, and then depending on the case, depending on the concept, there is an additional income.
So I'm thinking after this 2015, if some incentives could be included to motivate countries that are doing well, or if you like better. Otherwise,
sort of make a competition. Yes.
I have a question. When you were designing the MDGs in 2000 or 99, what was the contribution of the developing countries? I mean, do we know? Can we know?
Contribution of developing countries. It was in kind. Because
not like financially, in terms of information, conceptually,
well,
there was a huge campaign back then at the national level. First of all, governments, by signing the declaration, they already confirmed that they will be working in this direction. They started aligning their national development strategies with that of the MDGs. Then there was a huge public awareness campaign.
No, but before having the whole agenda, the whole concept of MDGs, like where were they developed? Yeah, where were they born from? Whose ideas and how much?
Maybe you missed it. I was saying that it was hiddenly done and driven by UN.
Precisely, but UN has a lot of offices and a lot of people. Like,
so what would you change? From your concern, what would you change for
I would definitely try to
make it more of a participatory? And do you think that Rio Plus 20 Summit helped it enough? Was it a platform for debates, for countries making proposals, talking about their priorities, developing new indices? Was it helpful?
Maybe I'm not right, but does it stress on the environment more?
Rio Plus 20?
Yeah.
It was reconfirming that unfortunately after the Agenda 21 and Proton-led institutions, when the concept of sustainable development was born, it was more stressing that, guys, we have human capital which we have to pay for, we have economic capital which we have to pay for, but we treat environmental capital for granted. So at that point, some 25 years ago, into 1989, it was said that we shall bring environment into the same level of priority in the agenda. That's why the concept of the 3 pillars emerged. But Rio Plus 20 is about the concept of sustainable development. It's a diagram which was shown to you so many times with all 3 different pillars interlinked. What about time bound? What do you think the timing for the next upscaled MDGs will be from 2015 up to when?
25.
Why 25? 10 years?
It should be 15.
It should be the same 15. Why 15?
And so too long till 15.
50, 50.
Yeah, 50.
Will you be able to see the results?
Why not? Maybe if you put like
you will put the goals and then die.
No, if you put like interpoints, like let's go 15, next 15, and then like this.
Aha, well this is interesting. So she's Oli is proposing that we will have an intermediate, like a cuts.
That is like
So we have a longer term goal perspective.
Yeah, but there's a principle of backcasting when you have like a really ambitious goal and then you try to understand how to reach it and you put like medium goals step by step.
But the current MDGs are only for 15 years.
No, they were interim goal up to 2010. And
when did they start? Yeah, I was telling you yesterday.
2015.
When?
2000.
No. From which particular year we start calculating MDGs? What is the baseline for MDGs? 1990, finally. It's for 25 years. It's for a quarter of a century they were set. It's enough for a child born today being receiving the results of these efforts by the time he's an adult. So this has a sense. So what do you think now? For how many years?
Maybe 25 again. Because when we define, we say without compromising the needs of future generations.
Yes.
We must take that, take into consideration the starting of the next generation.
And it will help us maybe to revisit them, because the world is changing so quickly. The capability of collection of data and statistics is changing. We are improving our ability to compare countries, to bring them to the international standards. So maybe in 25 years, in 2050, we will have completely different world, and we will be able to set even more ambitious goals for the whole society. Okay, so what I'm writing here is pretty much in line with what we discussed. So the questions were, do we need another global development agenda at all? Should it have explicit targets? Should it have measurable targets? Maybe we go into more qualitative methods, or we still stick to the quantitative methods. Who will select and formulate new goals? Remember we discussed whether it will be representatives of the Western donors and international organizations, or it will be UN member countries, or maybe some committee of experts, or it will be you and I, people, citizens of the world, in developing and developed world. So all together in a participatory and effective and transparent manner. Yeah? What other questions we have to answer before we proceed with Agenda 2015 plus? How should goals be formulated? How many goals, targets, and indicators? The success with MDGs was that they were not too many. They were easy, they were understandable, and affordable, yes? So should we go for a more sophisticated manner, or still stick to this simplicity concept? Should current MDGs be better clustered? Because they were saying that gender is cross-cutting, environment is cross-cutting. Why we try to fix them into one goal if they affect the others? Yes? Others, in the beginning of when we started the MDG campaign, were saying that poverty is an overarching, is an umbrella. So if you lift up the other goals, it will improve the living standards, and vice versa. So how do they interrelate? What's the time horizon? 5 years? Maybe it's too short to adapt to the national levels. 25, maybe it's too long for sustaining the momentum over the whole time. So maybe now the world is developing so quickly that we will need only 15 years to reach them, or to make changes, or revisit and correct some of the goals. Which is the baseline year? Which one we will use? 2015? Or will introducing new goals still revert the tracks back to 1990, or start with a new century? Yes, because we will be having maybe new targets related to human rights, related to inequalities, related to more environmental aspects. So do we want to make a baseline as 2015, or we'll go back into the past? Are data available for it, for benchmarking? Do we have enough of statistical data? To be reached globally, nationally, or subnationally. So now we understand that think globally, act locally. So we need to think about whether it can be implemented in a reasonable way at the very small household in the small community. So only if we can make change in the community, in the household, it will eventually make change globally. Yeah. And will we use MDGs in absolute or relative terms? In January this year, there was produced the report of the UN Secretary General, high-level panel on sustainable development, and this report was called Resilient People, Resilient Planet, a Future Worth Choosing. And then from this report, I extracted some of the interesting facts. We will be almost 9 billion by 2040. This was this population growth remark. The number of middle class consumers will increase by 3 billion in next 20 years. So consumerism will.
And what will be the number on this by 3 billion?
It means that the middle class, the people who are living better and consume more, will increase by 2000 in 20 years by 3 billion from now. Extra 3 billion people will be consuming more.
What do we have now?
I don't know now. The demand for resources will rise exponentially. By 2030, the world will need at least 50% more food, so doubling, and almost doubling the energy consumption, and 30% more drinkable fresh water. In 2030, a child born today will turn 18. And will we have enough done in these years to give her or him sustainable, fair, and resilient future that all of our children deserve? So these questions are posed in that report. So what comes after the Agenda 2015? One option was proposed by Colombia and Guatemala, as I said. They said, hey guys, again we are forgetting about the environmental concerns. They drop out from our agenda, and we need to lift them up. We need to speak more about that there is one planet, this boundaries of one planet concept, yes? And they were proposing that we start formulating sustainable development goals and run them in parallel with MDGs. So they will be sort of successors of MDGs. But the point with this is that these will be completely different aspects. MDGs are more combining all levels of, all pillars of sustainable development, while here we are talking more about forests, oceans, water, food security, renewable energy, of course, consumption patterns, poverty. Another option is we continue with MDGs. So we just make a revision, we make an assessment, we add more satisfy the sustainability gaps, like we include the inequalities issues, redistribution, fairness, and we run them, continue to run them. And the third option would be to stop with MDGs and rediverse them into the sustainable development goals with all three aspects taken into account equally. The main principles of sustainable development goals that they will be covering more than what MDGs are covering now. What we're covering now? Economic capabilities, human capabilities, social aspects, and we have gender and environment, but in a specific sectors like MDGs. But we are missing protective capabilities like social protection, human security. We are missing cultural aspects, non-discrimination, dignity, and political aspects, like capabilities, freedoms, voices heard, access to justice, transparency, and so on and so forth. So ideally, SDGs should cover them all. And here is the list of simple principles for post-2015 goals framework. First, it should engage all actors, as we discussed. Yeah? Stay simple and concise. Be relevant to new geopolitical and economical context, because the world is changing every day, and we need to hear the states, to hear the nations, what their priorities, and how we should better and in a more effective way change the world. Contain measurable targets, but more sophisticated probably, and not to the extremes of life and death, but more speaking about the quality of life. Include the needs of people with disabilities, and reshape links between goals, targets, and indicators so that they are in an equally the same level. Not only output, but closer to the impact level. Yeah? So how we will do it? What I'm having on the slide is the, I've read many papers which were preceding the Rio+20 by different organizations, and the last slide will give you the list of literature which I used for that. And this is the compilation of every proposals and suggestions that I came across. First, establish an expert mechanism by UN Secretary General to elaborate and refine the goals. So between now, it's already the process started with the Rio+20, we shouldn't waste our time. We should start working on how the MDGs will change, and the successor of SDGs comes and starts launches from the 1st January 2016. So we need this process for discussions, negotiating, and so on and so forth. Then select some topics such as food security or energy, and make some tests, make some pilots with some particular countries. So to start applying this SDGs in some particular countries, volunteering countries, to test how it's working. Also, the proposition is to adopt SDGs already with the targets, indicators, and areas on the 68th UN General Assembly in 2013, and integrate SDGs into post-2015 development agenda starting 1st January 2016. So this is an overview. I tried to go through articles like The Economist, The Guardian, what happened after the Rio +20. But looks like people are preoccupied with the general failures of the forum rather than speaking about sustainable development goals. And it wasn't a priority because it was just an initial state. This nota bene here is saying that SDGs at 3 years were limited to a very preliminary discussion that does not commit to any specifics before substantial questions regarding linkages to the MDGs process and the post-2015 development framework are explored further. So it was just the starting point for the discussions, and we have 3.5 years to see what we're heading to. That's all. Thanks for your attention. Here is the I think we have 10 minutes for extra, I don't know, debates, questions, I don't know. Yes?
I have, what if a person lived on 99 cents per day, was below the poverty line, for example, in 2000. And now in 2015 he has $1.01. He's above poverty line, not impoverished, but it's not a big difference for him. But we see this MDGs and we think that we achieved it, that everything is fine.
Okay, thanks a lot for this question. That's a very valid question, and I asked myself this question when I was approximately your age, and I said, okay, but that's what politicians are doing. They have access to statistics. They have access to the real situation on poverty. So suppose I'm running for the presentational campaign, and I understand that many people are living just below poverty line, as you said. Yes. But there are many more, like the big cloud, who are living in an extreme poverty. So what I'm saying, I'm taking this layer, estimate approximately the cost of how much it will take me to lift them up, and then in my presidential campaign I say, I promise you that in 3 or 4 years I will improve the lives of, let's say, this is 10% of people, and they will live better. Yeah, but what he does, or she does, is that actually doing efforts in lifting up, because it's less costly and it's less effort, to lift them up above the poverty line, not looking into the rest. That's why what was introduced as a measurement by Oxford and used widely in Latin America and also now published by Human Development Reports. What index was introduced? Multidimensional poverty index. So now, knowing that, and for politicians not to cheat, we are looking into metrics now. For example, this is the person, Vlad, is standing here. Yes? And for example, you have different dimensions. For example, you have health, you have education, you have security, you have, I don't know, money, yes, economic. And now it's a matrix. So I treat you not only according to this figure, yes, of poverty, you are perhaps somewhere here in the middle. But your security, you're living in a very secure environment, so it's somewhere here, yes. Maybe your education is high, but you are disabled person, so it's here. So with this multidimensional approach, it will be easier to see where these people stand. And actually it's very good for policy measures, because if you see the whole cloud of people in your country and you see that majority of them are lacking, for example, security, then you will improve the security so that you lift up the majority of people being in a more secure situation. So there is more room for adjustments. Did I answer your question? Thank you.
Do you think that in this post-MDG period, are we going to reach this paradigm shift that was mentioned by many colleagues of you, so shifting from a classical economy to an ecological economy and from a consumerism behavior to a more responsible consumer behavior? And I was also wondering whether any politicians are acknowledging the necessity of this, so I mean not just doing cosmetics or small steps, but a real shift.
I will tell you my personal opinion, because I cannot speak on behalf of UNDP, and I need to say this into the camera. Yeah, it's very serious, I tell you. I represent an organization here. So I believe that politicians will still try to cheat. They will still try to pursue their own interests. But I believe with this globalized world, with new methods, with new technologies, with more pressure from the civil society to open up what's going on, to have access to data, and with us having more education, we are able to analyze this data, to see what is right and what is wrong. I think this pressure from bottom up will improve the situation. And it's also the more discussions, the more courses of this kind, and even back to your families, coming to your friends. If you change the mindset of people a little bit, I believe this awareness will improve and really change the situation for better. I believe in it. I'm positive. We have 5 more minutes, but if you want a break, you can go. Yes.
Well, when you talk about awareness, I was just thinking about the environment, when the environmental problems were presented. For example, I'm sure that many people are not aware about how to behave to have good environment. Maybe, and also I would like to say, to know whether there are some steps taken to raise the awareness of people about their behavior to sustainable environment.
Again, my personal opinion. Why do we guys always have this paternalistic approach? Why do we think that somebody should change something for us? It's you, here and now. So you are educated. We are living in a world of technologies. We are living in this electronic world. There are, Christina was showing this Canadian example, yes? It's a very good cartoonish way of tips on how to be more environmentally friendly, on how to change your lifestyle at home. So go online, look for tips, and improve it first of all in your own life. You are the starting point. Don't wait for others. People who care already created these softwares for you. They already created these tips. They made them public. They put them online. They start to change the educational system to make it part of the educational curriculum. But the rest is in your hands. It's your own responsibility. Human development is not only about human rights. It's also about your responsibilities. Be active agents of your life.
I have a small problem. Maybe I just want to mention it and then seek your opinion on this sustainable development. If you look at the definition, it sounds like we need to be interested in meeting our needs and then thinking of the needs of thinking about this future thing when people are still struggling elsewhere to meet the needs of themselves today, like food, like water, and so on. So when you are telling them to think about their future, it becomes very, like you are talking. What is your,
I will start and then I will give a floor to Christina, who she has also to.
Thank you very much and thanks for this question. It comes to the chart with the overshoot of Earth's biocapacity, and obviously you do have a surplus and other countries create the deficit. So it's first and by all means those countries and where the poverty is much less should do something about the life of future generations. This cannot be avoided, and if SDGs will come, I'm sure it will include the calculation of ecological footprint for countries, for regions, for companies, for everybody. And then really they can see that which is the country which is in overshoot and which is the one which has surplus. And second, it's really why to care about the future if you have these absolute basic problems. Let's think back to Rio '92. Well, which country turned down the whole thing? So we internationally have to exercise pressure on countries that can do something, and the whole world agrees in something that's great and fantastic. And then it's like in ecology, everything works as in nature. The cheetah is hunting 9 times successfully out of 10, and then the lion just walks there, and the cheetah has to hunt again. That's how the world, for humankind, for countries which are more powerful, can really dictate and overcome others. So read a lot from Nobel Prize recipient Joseph Stiglitz. He has so much literature on inequality. We will have to reduce inequalities because it's endangering democracy, it's endangering our future. So that another goal will have to be to reduce inequality.
And maybe to add to this, I think that developed world will be under more pressure to change its pattern of living. So it will be a more responsibility of the developed world to don't consume and don't use more than is needed. And this footprint indicator will be helpful because all of you had seen how much you are imposing on this world. But we should not leave people struggling every day with survival to stay where they are. There will be new creative mechanisms of helping them with innovative methods to change from this brown path to the green path of living. And I've heard of many interesting projects now when the world and the food surplus of items for households for living are going to Africa, for example, or to people who are lacking it, so that we redistribute it. This is the purpose, because some of us having extra, others are lacking basic needs. So if we redistribute it and finding more effective ways of living, then the world will be better. But yes, Africa is an extreme case. But believe me, there are many people who are struggling every day on the streets, even in Europe.
So my conclusion on that point is that I just want to, when you raise a question after 2015 conference, you see, I wanted to comment on that, but then look, technology transfer is a fundamental issue. For example, if you produce and then you redistribute, the surplus goes to where the shortages are found. These are just interim measures, very, very short-term
recommend.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. I hope my lecture was useful.
One more small addition, because we broadcasted everything on internet, and during morning session we had 17 visitors who watched this, and we ran a poll what people would like to, are ready to sacrifice in terms to get more sustainable future in footprint, and only one person suggests he or she will sacrifice air conditioning, and one decided to take shorter shower, and nobody agreed to sacrifice flights, to limit to only one flight, and nobody agreed to drink less coffee.
Efficient toilets.
We put only 4 options because of it.
Thanks a lot.